Okay, so today we're going to be working on swordsmanship. Particularly, we're going to be working on the idea of Iai. So, Iai commonly is referred to the quick draw found within swordsmanship, but Iai itself means quick response. You're responding to something quickly. At the time of the samurai, it would have been using a particular sword to respond to an oncoming or surprise attack so they can protect themselves, etc., etc. So, Iaijutsu would have been something that would have been used as in Japan or feudal era samurai times would have been like the self-defense aspect for that time period. So when you look at Iaijutsu compared to Kenjutsu, the biggest difference between the two is Iaijutsu trains primarily with the blade sheathed. So it's drawing the blade in a way that allows for self-defense against an oncoming attack or a surprise attack, where Kenjutsu techniques tend to focus more where the blade is already out. And now they're going to fight someone, their blade is out, my blade's out, and we're going to duel. Kind of like the battlefield. You don't run onto the damn battlefield with the sword already in its sheath, you know what I'm saying? So if you're doing battlefield techniques, the blade would already be drawn. Where self-defense, it's not drawn, right? So today we are going to be looking at the idea of Iai. Another thing I talk a lot about is the way of the warrior. And when we talk about the way of the warrior, I think it's important that swordsmanship and the use of the sword is kind of a very integral aspect to training. And when you look at the name of the school, Budo, I started the Budo back in 2004. It means School of the Warrior Way. And that way is something that I feel is being extremely lost in the present day. Like a lot of people, you drive up the road and you see a karate school saying samurai or ninja kids, and and they really perpetuate and prostitute the arts in a way that they shouldn't be. It's very dishonorable because there's no karate school that should be selling anything with the word samurai on it. There's no samurai that ever did karate. The time periods don't work. Saying samurai did karate is like saying Hattori Hanzo used an Uzi. It's just not at the same time period. Would Hattori Hanzo use an Uzi? Well, fuck yeah. If it was readily available, he would. But he never used one. So you can't put that together, right? So I just think that in itself is, I stand against that. And for some reason, people just tend to want to add things to the pot that doesn't need to be there. That would be like me saying, hey guys, come on in, we're going to do MMA. We don't do MMA. So I'm not going to try to use an advertisement that kind of makes it look like we're doing MMA or kickboxing or some sort of tournament fighting. That's not what we do. Even though if I use those advertisements, we would have a lot more students. But it's not what we do. So I find it misleading, and I also feel like that's something that no teacher of the martial arts should be doing, because it's not right. So when I started the school back in 2004, and this is the idea of the training. So the Budo means School of the Warrior Way. And my idea, way back, almost 20 years ago, was that all I saw was people making up their own thing and creating their own thing. And none of them were at the level of the arts that they claimed to have learned, yet they were creating something in their opinion, more superior than the art that they thought they were training in. Like an example, we got Bob. And let's say Bob was, I studied Ninjutsu or Kenjutsu or Iaijutsu or whatever. And then he's like, well, what are you doing now? Well, I'm teaching, blah, 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 blah. What is that? What's my martial art? Well, Bob, I know you couldn't start your car 2 days ago. Why the hell are you coming up with this great way of the warrior art when, you clearly don't know, you're not tackling your whole life like a warrior. You know what I mean? And on top of that, I'm not taking shots at people that make their own art, but the reality of it is the way is in everything that we do. A monk is not a monk only when he's in a temple. Yeah?
Right.
Same thing with the martial artist. It's something that we do it. We always do it. It's what we do and how we do it. And so back in 2004, when I was like, okay, I'm done with all of this, and I'm not being disrespectful to the people that were in my life previous to 2004, but I wanted to preserve the history and the tradition of these traditions, of what's been passed down. You know, you got some people who are historians. I'm sure, you know, as you do your research, you'll find out there are people historians and they like, you know, this book or this scroll or this time period. But the reality of it is Ninjutsu started at a certain time period. And during this time period, then we have an evolution into the Sengoku Jidai, that time period. And then there's an evolution into the Edo Jidai, and the Edo period. And then there's an evolution into, okay, now we have the Meiji Jidai, or the Meiji Restoration, right? And then that goes into, you know, and there's this thing. Some people like to stick into one spot. I think that the growth of something in this, that the passing down of things is a beautiful aspect to the martial arts. It's like parenting a kid. So there's a story. There's a little girl was watching her mom, and she's cooking a ham. And she sees the mom take the ham, turns it one way, cuts it a certain way, puts it in, and then sticks it in the stove. And then she looks at her mom and she's like, Mom, why did you turn the ham and cut the ham a certain way just to get it in the stove? You could have just put it in the stove. The mom just looks at the little girl and smiles and says, you need to go ask Grandma. She says, okay. So she walks into the next room, she looks at Grandma, she says, Grandma, how come Mom took the ham, turned it, cut it a certain way just to get in the stove? She could have just put it in a pot and put it in the stove. The grandma looked at her and smiled and she says, you know what, you need to go in there and ask Great Granny. She's going to give you the answer. So the little girl walks into the other room. She sees Great Granny. She says, Great Granny, why did Mom take the ham, turn it a certain way, to cut it, just to put it in the stove? She could have just put it in a pot and put it in the stove. The Great Granny smiled at her and she said, well, when I was little, I saw my mom do it. And we didn't have a stove big enough that could even put a ham in it because we had very little money. That's the only way I learned how to cook a ham. So I saw my mom cut a ham like that so she could cook it. So that's how I learned. Your grandma learned it from me. Your mom learned from her. And now you're learning from your mom. That aspect is so lost in modern martial arts. It rips my heart out to get on like these websites and these YouTubes and these forums of people who are just ripping people up over something about a page in a book. When the essence of it is learning from someone and carrying on a tradition, carrying something on that has worth. Yeah? So when in 2004, when I started the school, the Budo, I wanted to preserve the traditions that we had that made me and helped me be the martial artist that I was. I studied more than 7. I'm not going to deny that. Shit, there's lots of people who trained with me in different martial arts previous to 2004 that no problem with that. It's just that these are the 7 that I was like, this is what helped me and this is what I'm going to teach. So from there we have the Budo, the School of the Warrior Way, and we teach these 7 warrior traditions. And that's what we hold to. These philosophies and strategies and principles, and we try to educate ourselves with historical documents and scrolls and everything to give us a better understanding, but ultimately it's the tradition and the passing on the information from teacher to student, and that you guys can take it and hopefully pass it on to the people that you love or protect the ones that you love. Now that brings us into today's class. Today we're going to be working on Iaijutsu, or quick response. Generally it is using the sword, but we're going to look at it from various different angles, whether it's swordsmanship or Tanto Jutsu, which is using the knife, which I think is a little bit more applicable in the modern day. Either way, we're looking at the concepts from various different angles. Do you understand?
I do.
Good. So, Mr. Dupree, if you could